What's the pettiest hill you've ever died on? I was a sophomore at Westfield University when I decided to wage war over a single point, 1 point, on a chemistry exam worth 200 points total. My professor, Dr. Brennan, had marked my answer wrong on question 47. The question asked for the molecular weight of sodium chloride. I wrote 58.44 g/mol. She marked it wrong and wrote 58.4 next to it. I lost 1 point. My grade dropped from 94% to 93.5%. Most people would let it go. It's 1 point. It doesn't change my letter grade. It barely affects my GPA, but I couldn't let it go. Because 58.44 is correct. I double-checked, triple-checked, looked it up in 3 different textbooks and verified it online. The molecular weight of sodium chloride is 58.44 grams per mole, not 58.4. I approached Dr. Brennan after class. Professor, I think there's been a mistake on question 47. She barely looked up from her papers. What about it? You marked my answer wrong, but 58.44 is the correct molecular weight for sodium chloride. She glanced at my exam. I prefer rounded answers. 58.4 is cleaner, but the question didn't ask for a rounded answer, and 58.44 is more precise. Her jaw tightened. Miss Chen, she caught herself. I'm not Chinese, but apparently all Asian students look the same to her. Miss Nakamura, I've been teaching chemistry for 15 years. I think I know what answers I'm looking for. I'm sure you do, but this is objectively correct. I shouldn't lose points for giving a more accurate answer. She stared at me for a long moment. The grade stands. 1 point won't kill you. That night, I researched molecular weights until 3 a.m. I printed out pages from peer-reviewed journals, official chemistry databases, and university textbooks from Harvard, MIT, and Stanford. All confirmed. 58.44 g/mol. The next day, I returned with my evidence. Professor, I have documentation here that supports my answer. She didn't even look at the papers. I told you yesterday, the grade stands. But you're penalizing me for being more accurate than you expected. Her face reddened. Are you calling me incompetent? I'm saying my answer is correct and I deserve that point back. She leaned forward. Let me be clear. You will accept this grade, or you can take it up with the department chair. But I guarantee you, making a fuss over 1 point will not end well for you. I smiled. That sounds like a threat. It's a warning. I gathered my papers. I'll take it to the department chair then. Her eyes narrowed. Good luck with that. The department chair, Dr. Rodriguez, was a soft-spoken man in his 60s who looked like he'd rather be tending a garden than dealing with student complaints. His office smelled like coffee and old books. So you're here about 1 point, he said, reviewing my file. I'm here about academic integrity, I corrected. He raised an eyebrow. I laid out my evidence. The textbooks, the journal articles, the official databases, everything confirmed that 58.44 g/mol was correct. Dr. Rodriguez examined the materials carefully. This is quite thorough, he admitted. But Dr. Brennan has the right to grade as she sees fit. Does she have the right to mark correct answers as wrong? He sighed. I'll talk to her. 3 days later, Dr. Brennan approached me before class. I spoke with Dr. Rodriguez, she said. Your point has been restored. She said it like she was doing me a huge favor. Thank you, I replied. She leaned closer. But let me give you some advice. You're in my class for the rest of the semester. You might want to consider whether this was worth it. That's when I knew I'd made an enemy. Over the next month, Dr. Brennan found ways to make my life miserable. She called on me constantly during lectures, hoping I'd stumble. She graded my lab reports more harshly than others. She questioned every answer I gave, demanding I explain my reasoning down to the smallest detail. The breaking point came during our midterm exam. I studied for 2 weeks. I knew the material inside and out. I was confident I'd aced it. When I got my exam back, I stared at the grade in disbelief. 67%, a D+. I flipped through the pages. Question after question was marked wrong, but my answers were correct. She deducted points for insufficient detail on questions where other students had written less. She marked molecular formulas wrong because I used subscripts instead of writing out the numbers. She penalized me for showing my work incorrectly, even though I'd arrived at the right answers. This wasn't grading. This was retaliation. My lab partner Zoe leaned over to look at my exam. What the hell? She whispered. I wrote basically the same answers as you and got an 89. Other students started comparing their exams to mine. The patterns were obvious. Dr. Brennan had held me to impossibly high standards while grading everyone else normally. I marched to Dr. Rodriguez's office that afternoon. She's sabotaging my grade, I said, spreading the exam across his desk. He studied it carefully, comparing my answers to the answer key. These appear to be correct, he said slowly. They are correct. She's failing me because I challenged her on 1 point. Dr. Rodriguez rubbed his temples. These are serious accusations. Then investigate them. He promised he would. A week later, he called me back to his office. I've reviewed your exam with Dr. Brennan, he said. She maintains that her grading is fair and consistent with her standards. Did you check other students' exams? I can't share other students' grades with you. I'm not asking for their grades. I'm asking if you verified that she's applying the same standards to everyone. His silence told me everything. You didn't check, I said. Miss Nakamura, I understand you're frustrated, but no, I interrupted. You don't understand. She told me this would happen. She warned me that fighting for that 1 point wouldn't end well. This is retaliation, and you're enabling it. Dr. Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. I suggest you focus on your studies and avoid any further confrontations. I left his office furious. The university was protecting her. They'd rather let one professor abuse her power than admit they had a problem. That weekend, I called my dad. Drop the class, he said immediately. Take the W and move on. I can't drop it. It's required for my major. Then transfer sections. She's the only professor teaching it this semester. Dad was quiet for a moment. Sometimes you have to pick your battles, kiddo. What if this is my battle? Over 1 point? Over the principal. He sighed. You get that stubbornness from your mother. Mom had died when I was 12. She'd been a civil rights lawyer who'd spent her career fighting cases everyone said she couldn't win. Dad always said she never met a losing battle she wouldn't take on. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, I said. Monday morning, I was back in chemistry class. Dr. Brennan barely acknowledged me, but I felt her watching every move I made. During the lecture, she discussed chemical bonds. When she mentioned electronegativity values, I raised my hand. Yes, she said, clearly annoyed. You said the electronegativity of oxygen is 3.5, but most sources list it as 3.44. The room went dead silent. Other students turned to stare at me. Dr. Brennan's knuckles went white as she gripped her marker. I was rounding for simplicity. Should we always round our answers then? Or only sometimes? She knew exactly what I was doing. The sodium chloride question hung in the air between us. Context matters, she said through gritted teeth. How do we know when to round and when to be precise? Experience. Whose experience? Yours or the scientific community's? The other students were looking back and forth between us like they were watching a tennis match. Dr. Brennan set down her marker. Perhaps you'd like to teach the class, Miss Nakamura? I'm just asking for clarification on your standards. My standards are clearly outlined in the syllabus. The syllabus says answers should be accurate. It doesn't mention rounding preferences. She stared at me for a long moment. See me after class. When the room cleared, Dr. Brennan closed the door. What exactly do you think you're doing? Learning chemistry. You're being disruptive. I'm asking questions. Isn't that what students are supposed to do? She stepped closer. You think you're very clever, don't you? I think I deserve to be graded fairly. Fair? She laughed bitterly. You want to talk about fair? I have a PhD from Johns Hopkins. I've published 47 papers. I've been teaching longer than you've been alive. And you think you can waltz in here and challenge my expertise over decimal places? I think expertise includes admitting when you're wrong. Her face flushed red. Get out of my classroom. Gladly. But I didn't leave the building. Instead, I went to the library and started digging. If Dr. Brennan wanted to play dirty, I needed to understand the game. I started with her published papers. Most were solid, well-researched work. But as I dug deeper, patterns emerged. Co-authors who weren't credited properly. Data that seemed too perfect. References that led to dead ends. I spent 3 days going through every paper she'd published in the last decade. Her early work was impeccable, but somewhere around 5 years ago, things started to change. The research became sloppier, the data more convenient, the conclusions more definitive than the evidence supported. Then I found it. Her most cited paper, published 5 years ago, contained a calculation error, not a small one, a fundamental mistake that invalidated the entire conclusion. The molecular weight she'd calculated for a complex organic compound, off by 0.04, the same kind of precision error she'd penalize me for correcting. But this wasn't just wrong. It was published wrong, in a peer-reviewed journal, cited by dozens of other researchers who'd built their work on her faulty foundation. I printed everything, cross-referenced the calculations, double-checked my math 3 times. I wasn't going to make the same mistake she had. I emailed 3 chemistry professors at different universities, asking them to verify my calculations. I didn't mention Dr. Brennan's name or the source of the error. I just sent them the raw data and asked if they could check my work. All 3 confirmed it. The calculation was wrong. Significantly wrong. The error compounded throughout the paper, affecting every conclusion drawn from the initial measurement. Dr. Patricia Hoffman from Berkeley wrote back, "This is a substantial error. If this was published in a peer-reviewed journal, it needs to be corrected immediately. Researchers may have based subsequent work on these flawed calculations." Dr. Michael Torres from MIT was more blunt. "Whoever made this calculation error needs to issue a retraction. This could affect an entire line of research." The third professor, Dr. Sarah Kim from Northwestern, was the most concerning. "I'm actually familiar with this compound from my own research. If these calculations are being used by other researchers, we could have a significant problem in the field." Armed with this information, I requested another meeting with Dr. Rodriguez. "I found something," I said, sliding the papers across his desk. He read through them, his expression growing more serious with each page. "Where did you get this?" "The university library. It's all public record." "You think there's an error in Dr. Brennan's research?" "I don't think it. I've proven it. And I've had it verified by professors at 3 other institutions." Dr. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. "This is significant. It's more than significant. If this error affected other research, it could impact the entire field." He was quiet for several minutes, reading through my documentation. "What do you want me to do with this?" "I want you to understand that this isn't about 1 point anymore. It's about academic integrity. Dr. Brennan has been retaliating against me for questioning her authority. She's more concerned with protecting her ego than maintaining scientific standards. These are very serious allegations." "Yes, they are." Dr. Rodriguez closed the folder. "I need to discuss this with the dean." 3 days later, I was called to the dean's office. Dean Phillips was a stern woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a legal drama. Her office was decorated with diplomas and awards that probably cost more than my car. "Miss Nakamura," she said, "you've caused quite a stir." Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Brennan were both there, sitting on opposite sides of the room like opposing lawyers. "I've reviewed your research," Dean Phillips continued. "It raises some concerning questions." Dr. Brennan spoke up. "This is a vindictive student trying to destroy my career over a grade dispute." "Is it vindictive to point out errors in published research?" I asked. "You're not qualified to evaluate my work. I'm qualified to do basic math." and your math is wrong. Dean Phillips held up her hand. Dr. Brennan, have you reviewed Miss Nakamura's findings? Dr. Brennan's jaw tightened. I haven't had time for a thorough analysis. I have, said a voice from the doorway. We all turned to see Dr. Chen, the university's head of the chemistry department, and a woman Dr. Brennan clearly hadn't expected to see. Dean Phillips asked me to independently verify these calculations, Dr. Chen said, entering the room with a thick folder. Miss Nakamura is correct. There's a significant error in the published paper. The room went silent. Dr. Chen continued. Moreover, I've reviewed Miss Nakamura's recent exam and compared it to other students in the same class. The grading appears to be inconsistent. Dr. Brennan looked like she wanted to disappear. What are you recommending? Dean Phillips asked. A full investigation into both the research error and the grading practices. If the error in the published paper affected other research, we have an obligation to issue corrections. And if there's evidence of retaliatory grading, that's a serious ethical violation. Dean Phillips nodded. Dr. Brennan, you're being placed on administrative leave pending this investigation. Dr. Brennan shot to her feet. This is ridiculous. You're destroying my career over one student's vendetta. I'm protecting the integrity of this institution. Dean Phillips replied calmly. Dr. Brennan turned to me, her eyes blazing with fury. I hope you're satisfied. I'm satisfied that the truth is coming out, I said. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Dean Phillips looked at me. Miss Nakamura, I want you to know that this university does not tolerate retaliation against students. Your chemistry grade will be reviewed by an independent professor. Thank you. Dr. Rodriguez cleared his throat. What about the rest of the semester? Miss Nakamura still needs to complete the course. Dr. Chen will be taking over the class, Dean Phillips said. Over the next month, the investigation unfolded like a slow-motion disaster. The error in Dr. Brennan's paper had indeed affected subsequent research. 12 different studies had cited her work as foundational. 3 graduate students had built their entire dissertations around her flawed calculations. The journal issued a correction. Other researchers had to revise their work. Some had to completely redo experiments. The ripple effect spread through the entire field of organic chemistry. Dr. Brennan's reputation was destroyed, but that wasn't the worst of it. The investigation into her grading practices revealed a pattern of retaliation against students who questioned her authority. Over the past 5 years, 6 students had filed complaints about unfair grading. All had been dismissed by the administration. All had been students who had challenged Dr. Brennan in class or questioned her methods. My exam was regraded by Dr. Chen. I scored a 94%, an A. The same grade I would have received if Dr. Brennan had graded fairly. The other students' exams were also reviewed. 3 others showed evidence of inconsistent grading, all students who had questioned Dr. Brennan's methods or answers at some point during the semester. The most damaging evidence came from Dr. Brennan's own computer. University IT discovered deleted emails and files that showed she had been deliberately targeting students who challenged her. There were detailed notes about how to humble specific students, plans for making certain students' lives difficult, even discussions with other faculty about problem students who needed to be put in their place. The investigation report was devastating. Dr. Brennan was found guilty of research misconduct, academic retaliation, and violation of university ethics policies. She was stripped of tenure and quietly asked to resign. She took a position at a small community college in another state, where she taught basic chemistry to students who would never question her methods. Word spread around campus quickly. I became known as the student who took down a professor over 1 point. Most people thought I was crazy. You could have just let it go, my roommate said. She could have just admitted she was wrong, I replied. Some students treated me like a hero. Others avoided me, afraid I might turn my attention to their professors. The chemistry department gave me a plaque commemorating my commitment to academic integrity. I hung it in my dorm room, right next to my improved chemistry grade. But there was one person who understood completely. Dr. Chen stopped me after class one day. Your mother would be proud, she said. You knew my mom? We went to law school together before I switched to chemistry. She never backed down from a fight either. Dad says I get my stubbornness from her. Dr. Chen smiled. Stubbornness is just another word for principles when you're right. 6 months later, I received an email from a graduate student at MIT. She'd read about the correction to Dr. Brennan's paper and wanted to thank me. Her thesis had been based partly on that flawed research. Catching the error early saved her 2 years of work. You probably don't realize it, she wrote. But questioning that 1 point may have prevented a lot of bad science from being published. Other emails followed. Researchers whose work had been affected by the error. Graduate students who had to revise their dissertations. Postdocs who had to redo experiments. All of them thanked me for having the courage to speak up, for refusing to back down, for fighting over what seemed like the smallest, most insignificant detail. That's when I understood that my petty hill wasn't so petty after all. The next semester, I took organic chemistry with Dr. Chen. On the first day of class, she stood at the front of the room and looked at each of us. I want you to know that in this class, questions are encouraged. Challenges are welcome. If you think I've made an error, I want you to tell me. That's how science works. That's how we learn. She looked directly at me. Sometimes the most important discoveries come from questioning what everyone else accepts as fact. I raised my hand. What if our question seems trivial? What if it's just about a decimal place or a rounding error? Dr. Chen smiled. There are no trivial questions in science, only trivial responses to important questions. Throughout that semester, other students came to me with questions about their professors. Students who were afraid to speak up. Students who had been retaliated against for asking questions. I started an unofficial support group. We called it the Petty Hill Society. Our motto, no detail too small, no principle too minor. We helped students document unfair grading. We researched disputed exam questions. We challenged professors who played favorites. We held them accountable for their mistakes. Most of the time, we won. Not because we were smarter or more prepared than other students, but because we were willing to fight for what was right, no matter how small it seemed. By my senior year, the Petty Hill Society had 30 members. We'd helped dozens of students get fair grades. We'd exposed 3 more professors for research misconduct. We'd forced the university to revise its academic integrity policies. Dean Phillips called us the most effective student advocacy group in the university's history. I graduated summa cum laude with a perfect GPA in chemistry. At graduation, Dad found me after the ceremony. "I'm proud of you," he said. "Your mom would have loved to see this. She would have told me to fight harder," I said. He laughed. "Probably. She never met a battle she wouldn't take on." "Neither did I, apparently." "No," he said, hugging me tight. "Neither did you." Last month, I started my PhD program in chemistry at Stanford. My advisor is Dr. Elena Vasquez, a woman who's known for challenging conventional wisdom and pushing her students to question everything. During our first meeting, she asked about my undergraduate experience. I told her about Dr. Brennan, about the 1 point, about the investigation that followed, about the Petty Hill Society and all the battles we'd fought. She listened quietly, then smiled. "Good," she said. "Science needs more people who are willing to die on petty hills. That's how we make progress. By being stubborn, by being right, and by having the courage to stand up when everyone else is willing to accept being wrong." She pulled out a thick file. "I want to show you something." Inside were copies of Dr. Brennan's corrected paper and all the research that had to be revised because of it. "This error affected 17 different studies," Dr. Vasquez said. "Dozens of researchers had to redo their work. 3 major pharmaceutical companies had to abandon drug development programs that were based on the flawed calculations. The total cost was estimated at over $50 million. I stared at the file. All because of one calculation error? All because no one else was willing to question it. The paper went through peer review. It was accepted by a prestigious journal. It was cited hundreds of times. But no one checked the basic math until you did." Dr. Vasquez closed the file. "That's the power of paying attention to details. That's why precision matters. That's why we can't let small errors slide, even when everyone else thinks they're unimportant." Now, whenever I teach undergraduate students, I tell them the same story. About Dr. Brennan and the 1 point. About the investigation and the corrected research. About the importance of questioning authority, even when it seems petty. 1 point matters, I tell them. Precision matters. Truth matters. And sometimes the most petty hill is exactly the right one to die on. I tell them about my mother, the civil rights lawyer who never backed down from a fight. About the Petty Hill Society and all the battles we won. About the importance of standing up when everyone else is willing to sit down. Because at the end of the day, I say, it wasn't about the point. It was about everything the point represented. It was about the principle that being correct should count for something. That students have the right to challenge their professors when they're wrong. That academic integrity means more than protecting someone's ego. Last week, one of my students came to me with a problem. Her organic chemistry professor had marked her answer wrong on a test. She'd calculated the molecular weight of a compound as 142.18 g-mol. He'd marked it wrong and written 142.2 next to it. She'd lost 1 point. Her grade dropped from 94% to 93.5%. "It seems so petty," she said. "It's just 1 point. Should I even bother fighting for it?" I smiled and pulled out my old chemistry exam from Dr. Brennan's class, the one with the red ink marking my sodium chloride answer wrong. "Let me tell you a story," I said, "about the pettiest hill I ever died on." "What happened?" she asked. "I learned that sometimes the most petty hill is exactly the right one to die on." She looked at her exam, then back at me. "Will you help me?" "Of course," I said. "That's what the Petty Hill Society is for. Because some battles are worth fighting, no matter how small they seem. Some principles are worth defending, even when everyone thinks you're crazy. And sometimes, 1 point can change everything, even if it takes years to understand why. Even if it costs you everything. Even if everyone thinks it's petty. Especially then. That's the hill I chose to die on. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Because being right matters. Standing up matters. Fighting for what you believe in matters. And sometimes, the smallest battles have the biggest consequences. That's the lesson I learned from 1 point on a chemistry exam. That's the hill I'll always be willing to die on, no matter how petty it seems."